Hello everyone and welcome to another quick tips video. This is a video which is going to be super short, just to give you the highlights of a particular problem and my advice to you based off my years of experience in the board game industry. Again, apologies for the background, I'm currently in the midst of moving house. So yeah, anyway, this topic today is going to be top tips for working with a manufacturer. Now, this can be a prototype manufacturer, this can be a fully fledged, full print run manufacturer, most likely going to be in China. And just after I've been working on my fourth game, Fatal Knockout, at the moment, as well as the expansion Fatal Knockout Oddities. I've been learning throughout the years on like little bits here and there that could be really helpful when it comes to making sure everything is correct when manufacturing and smooth when working with a manufacturer. But working on Fatal Knockout in particular has given me a lot of stuff to go over. But I'm just going to limit it to three of the most important things, which might sound obvious, but you can miss it, and it can lead to a lot of extra work. So the first thing is what order to prepare files in. So any file which requires other components to stay a particular size, it should be done last. Sounds obvious, but you might not clock it at the time of making it. But so, for example, with Fatal Knockout, recently, and people on the Crab Studios Discord community will know this, I had to recently change the player board size, but I didn't realize I was going to have to change the player board size. So I thought halfway through submitting the files to the manufacturer, I'm like, okay, I'll just do the player boards whilst I'm waiting on some other templates to come through, such as like the tokens or the box templates. So yeah, I just did it, and then I did them all 10 of them, because it's 10 fighters including the Oddities expansion, and then I submitted it, and then found out I would have to change the size of the player board, I'd have to change the size of the tokens, and basically have to change the size of everything. Which caused me to have to redo the player board. And the reason for that is because if I had to change the size of the tokens, of which the tokens go on the player board, then I'd have to change the player board. I'd have to make sure the tokens all fit nicely. I have to shrink the tokens actually on the player board where you're supposed to put them, and that sort of thing. So I think for starters, always do the box first. The box is unlikely to change, and the cards as well. The card sizes are going to stay the same because they're not usually reactive to you know, box size or anything like that. They are standard size, and then everything fits around them. Like in Fatal Knockout, they are poker sized, and I knew they were going to be poker sized forever. Nothing was going to change that. We'd have to change stuff around that to make sure that works, so we just kept them at poker size so I could just do them first. So just sit back when you get your quote, when you know exactly what components are going to be in your game. Sit back and think which of these components will never need to be changed in terms of their dimensions. So now just work on those first. Second point is check the quote and then check it again. Now, this isn't particularly regarding the cost of everything, though. It would be good to, it's always good to look around, look at different quotes, see which ones are doing it cheaper, because doesn't necessarily have to be cheaper because of quality, but because of what machines that the factories have, the way they type of work, how labor intensive they are compared to automated, and then also what stock they already have in the warehouse, and how standard your game is. For example, like if you're working in like non-standard cards, yeah, like 2x1, for example, 2x1 ratio, and you find this factory that just so happened to just recently do a 2x1 game, 2x1 card game, and they have a bunch of these sheets left over that had to be custom made in order to fit into the machine correctly to be able to try and get the most cards out as possible. They're going to be cheaper, even though their quality is going to be the same, that kind of thing. Anyway, moving on from that, yeah, check the quote and check it again, primarily to make sure all the dimensions for your game are correct. This is something which, through communication error, can be misaligned, and there can be discrepancies with what you've set out to achieve with this game and what the manufacturer thought you set out to achieve with this game. The manufacturer is never going to Well, most likely never going to change dimensions just to make it easier for them without consulting you, that sort of thing. Everything should be a back and forth. But during the process of Fatal Knockout, because it's such a complex game in terms of manufacturing, due to the weird boards and the fact that like if you can turn the board into like an arcade cabinet, and all dimensions are slightly different, and the box for the Oddities expansion is like different in terms of the width and height compared to the base game box, even though they house the same components, that sort of thing. It was all very complex, and it took about 3 or 4 different attempts of back and forth of going through the quote to start to realize, like, oh, the Oddities box, that's 2 centimeters smaller than the player boards. That can't work, because the player boards need to fit into the box. You know, that sort of thing. You don't need to be able to be insanely good at visualizing numbers in terms of like what those numbers will look like on the table when your board game is played out in front of everyone. It's just simply looking at, okay, look at the components. Do they fit in the box? Looking at components which are supposed to fit on top of other components, such as tokens on top of player boards, to be like, right, are those the correct size? And that sort of thing. Just slowing down and looking through the quote can be very valuable for your time, and making sure you don't have to redo stuff. And then finally, make sure everything is in CMYK. Sometimes manufacturers will not check this, depending on the service that they provide. Thankfully, with Fatal Knockout, I've had a very good liaison there at the factory, and it's been a very good back and forth. Thankfully, I did submit everything in CMYK anyway, but other problems which may have cropped up, they've told me about, which has been great. But just making sure that everything is in CMYK before you send it off to the manufacturer, incredibly important, because it's such a standard thing to do that some manufacturers might not even clock that it isn't, and then until it starts getting printed, and then they realize all the colors are washed out and it doesn't look great. But at that point, they've already spent a lot of money setting everything up, so it'll probably just go through a full print run. So yeah, those are my 3 tips for working with a manufacturer. Just to go over them again, make sure that you think about what order to prepare your files in to save you the most amount of time when it comes to having to redo stuff. Secondly, check the quote and check it again. Make sure all the dimensions in your quote are correct. And then finally, make sure everything is in CMYK. Cool. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully enjoyed. And I shall see you in the next one. Goodbye.